The most dangerous abuse of power begins the moment someone believes nobody is watching. Rain drifted steadily across Interstate 75 just outside Atlanta, turning the highway into a mirror of silver reflections beneath rows of amber streetlights. Every passing vehicle disappeared into the darkness with little more than the sound of tires cutting through wet pavement, leaving long stretches of road strangely quiet despite the city's endless motion. James Carter guided his dark gray sedan at the posted speed limit, one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel while soft jazz played through the speakers. His expression remained calm, almost thoughtful, as if the long workday had finally begun to fade behind him. The dashboard clock read a few minutes past 10 in the evening. Nothing about the drive felt unusual. Nothing suggested that within minutes an ordinary commute would become a lesson remembered far beyond a single highway. Behind him, blue emergency lights suddenly pierced the rain. James glanced into the rearview mirror, activated his turn signal immediately, and guided the sedan safely onto the shoulder without hesitation. The windshield wipers continued their steady rhythm while water rolled across the glass in thin streams. He lowered the driver's window halfway before the patrol cruiser had fully stopped behind him. Officer Ryan Cooper stepped into the cool night air, adjusting his rain jacket before approaching with measured confidence. Years of patrol had taught him to trust his instincts, sometimes more quickly than the facts deserved. His flashlight briefly illuminated the interior before he stopped beside the driver's window. "Good evening," James said politely. "How can I help you, officer?" Ryan studied him for several quiet seconds before answering. "License, registration, and proof of insurance." James nodded respectfully. Every movement remained slow and visible as he retrieved the requested documents. Ryan accepted them without comment, glancing from the paperwork back to James several times. "Where are you coming from tonight?" he asked. "Work," James answered calmly. "What kind of work keeps you out this late?" Ryan continued. James offered a courteous smile. "Long days sometimes become longer evenings." The answer seemed to satisfy nothing. Ryan looked around the interior once more before speaking again. "Step out of the vehicle for a moment." James complied immediately, closing the door gently behind him before standing beside the sedan with relaxed posture and both hands plainly visible. Rain settled across his jacket while distant headlights drifted past in the opposite lanes. Ryan slowly walked around the vehicle, occasionally glancing toward James without saying much. The highway remained almost silent except for passing traffic and the steady rainfall. After another moment, Ryan stopped directly in front of James and lowered his voice. Sometimes people prefer handling situations the easy way instead of creating unnecessary paperwork. James remained composed, his expression unchanged. "I prefer handling every situation the lawful way," he replied quietly. Ryan looked at him carefully, searching for a reaction that never appeared. James neither argued nor raised his voice. Instead, he simply met the officer's eyes with remarkable patience. After a long silence, he spoke once more. "Officer, are you certain you want every decision made here tonight to become part of the record?" For the first time since activating his emergency lights, Ryan hesitated. The question sounded strangely confident, yet James offered no explanation, no credentials, and no hint about why he had asked it. The rain continued falling between them as passing headlights briefly illuminated the roadside, and neither man realized that the quiet moments unfolding beneath those flashing lights would soon reveal far more than either expected. 6 hours earlier, long before rain settled across the interstate and flashing blue lights reflected against the wet pavement, James Carter had walked through the quiet entrance of an unmarked government building in downtown Atlanta, carrying nothing more than a leather briefcase and a cup of black coffee. Anyone passing him in the lobby would have assumed he was another professional beginning an ordinary workday. That assumption was exactly how he preferred to live. James believed the strongest investigators were the ones nobody remembered seeing. He greeted the security officer with a friendly smile, passed through routine screening, and disappeared into an elevator without drawing attention to himself. Inside a secure conference room, several investigators gathered around a digital display while supervisors reviewed ongoing integrity operations involving professional conduct and public accountability. The discussion never focused on catching people making honest mistakes. Instead, it centered on identifying patterns that could damage public trust if left unaddressed. James listened carefully, asked only a few thoughtful questions, and wrote short notes inside a plain notebook. He rarely spoke more than necessary because experience had taught him that careful observation often revealed more than long conversations. As the briefing ended, his supervisor reminded everyone that successful oversight depended upon patience, objectivity, and complete documentation rather than personal opinion. James nodded quietly before leaving the building to continue the remainder of his day. He spent the afternoon reviewing reports, attending meetings with investigators from different divisions, and organizing information connected to several unrelated administrative inquiries. Nothing suggested that his drive home would become connected to any official review. By early evening, he packed his briefcase, wished several co-workers a pleasant night, and headed toward the parking garage beneath the building. Rain clouds had already begun gathering over Atlanta, and light drops tapped softly against the windshield as he merged onto Interstate 75. He enjoyed driving alone because it allowed him to clear his thoughts after long hours of concentrated work. Soft jazz filled the interior while city lights gradually disappeared behind him. At nearly the same time, Officer Ryan Cooper reported for another evening patrol. During roll call, supervisors emphasized visibility, traffic enforcement, and professional communication with the public. Ryan listened attentively, collected his equipment, completed the standard inspection of his patrol vehicle, and began his assigned shift. Years of experience had convinced him that quick judgment often saved valuable time, and he trusted his instincts with increasing confidence. The first several traffic stops passed without incident, reinforcing his belief that routine decisions rarely required second thoughts. As darkness settled across the highway, dispatch continued providing routine updates while rain became heavier and traffic gradually thinned. Neither James nor Ryan had any reason to expect their paths would soon cross. One was simply driving home after a demanding day. The other believed he was beginning another ordinary shift protecting the community. Fate quietly placed both men on the same stretch of highway at precisely the same moment. Minutes later, blue emergency lights illuminated the rainy night, and James calmly guided his sedan onto the shoulder exactly as every responsible driver should. He collected his documents before the officer reached the window, keeping every movement slow, respectful, and visible. He had learned long ago that remaining calm never weakened a person's position. More often, it revealed the character of everyone involved. Standing beneath the falling rain, Ryan could not yet know that every decision made during the next few minutes would soon be examined far beyond the roadside, where their unexpected encounter had only just begun. Officer Ryan Cooper stood silently beside the rain-covered patrol cruiser while water streamed from the brim of his cap and pooled along the edge of the highway. James Carter remained beside his sedan exactly where he had been asked to stand, hands relaxed and visible, showing no sign of impatience despite the unusually long stop. Passing headlights briefly illuminated both men before disappearing into the darkness, leaving only the rhythm of steady rain and the soft crackle of the patrol radio. Ryan glanced once more at the driver's license before looking back at James. "You seem unusually comfortable for someone standing on the shoulder of an interstate this late at night," he remarked. James answered without hesitation. Remaining calm usually helps everyone make better decisions. Ryan studied him carefully, searching for nervousness that never appeared. Instead of responding immediately, he walked slowly around the sedan, examining the tires, license plate, and windows while his flashlight swept methodically across the exterior. Nothing appeared unusual. The registration matched. The vehicle identification returned without issue. Dispatch had already confirmed there were no warrants, alerts, or stolen vehicle reports connected to either the driver or the automobile. Yet Ryan continued to feel that something about the encounter did not fit the ordinary pattern of a routine traffic stop. He returned to his cruiser and requested an additional records inquiry. The dispatcher acknowledged the request before asking him to remain on the line. Several quiet moments passed while James waited patiently beneath the falling rain. He neither reached for his telephone nor attempted to interrupt the officer's work. Instead, he simply watched the highway with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to waiting for facts rather than reacting to assumptions. The dispatcher finally returned. "Everything available through standard records appears normal," she reported. "Advise if additional assistance is needed." Ryan thanked her, but remained unsatisfied. He stepped back toward James and lowered his voice. Tell me exactly where you were before getting on the interstate. James answered politely. Downtown Atlanta. Doing what? Ryan continued. Finishing work. What kind of work? James offered the same calm expression. Professional work that does not affect this traffic stop. Ryan frowned slightly. That is not much of an answer. James nodded respectfully. It is the most accurate answer I can give. The conversation remained remarkably controlled. Neither man raised his voice. Neither attempted to dominate the other. Even so, an unmistakable tension settled between them as each carefully measured every word. A transportation camera mounted high above the interchange silently overlooked the roadside, while the patrol vehicle's dashboard camera and body camera continued recording every moment according to department policy. Ryan did not think about the equipment documenting the encounter because it had become part of every shift. James noticed each camera immediately, but gave no indication that he had. Years of professional experience had taught him that careful documentation often revealed far more than emotional arguments ever could. Ryan reached for his portable radio once again. Dispatch, I need supervisory guidance on this stop. The reply came more slowly than before. Stand by, Officer Cooper. Your request is being reviewed. The wording caught Ryan's attention. Dispatch rarely used that phrase during routine traffic enforcement. Before he could respond, another message followed. Remain at your current location. A supervisor is en route. Ryan lowered the radio and looked toward James, who simply met his eyes with quiet composure. Looks like we will both be waiting a little longer, James said gently. Ryan gave a short nod without answering. In the distance, another set of headlights emerged through the rain, approaching with steady purpose, while neither man realized that the next vehicle arriving on the shoulder would quietly transform an ordinary roadside encounter into a lesson neither of them would ever forget. Rain continued falling across the shoulder of Interstate 75 as the approaching headlights gradually slowed behind Officer Ryan Cooper's patrol cruiser. Water shimmered beneath the flashing emergency lights while passing traffic moved steadily through the darkness, almost unaware that an ordinary roadside encounter was quietly becoming something far more significant. James Carter remained exactly where he had been standing from the beginning, calm, patient, and respectful. He neither questioned the delay nor attempted to hurry the process. Years of professional discipline had taught him that composure often revealed more than confrontation ever could. Ryan watched the approaching vehicle through narrowed eyes, expecting another patrol supervisor. Instead, an unmarked government sedan came to a smooth stop several yards behind the patrol cruiser. A middle-aged man wearing a dark raincoat stepped out, carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to official responsibility rather than public attention. He approached without urgency, exchanged a brief greeting with Ryan, and introduced himself simply as Captain Michael Lawson from the department's Professional Standards Division. Ryan acknowledged the introduction politely before explaining that the traffic stop had raised questions he believed required supervisory review. Lawson listened without interruption, occasionally glancing toward James, who remained beside his sedan with the same composed expression he had maintained throughout the evening. When Ryan finished describing the situation, Lawson asked a single question. Has every part of this encounter been recorded according to department policy? Ryan nodded immediately. Body camera, dashboard camera, and radio communications have all remained active. Lawson gave a quiet nod of approval before walking toward James. Good evening, sir. Thank you for your patience. James smiled politely. Good evening, Captain. Lawson continued in a calm voice. Would you be willing to verify your identity through the secure procedure we discussed earlier today? James answered without hesitation. Of course. He slowly reached inside his jacket, carefully keeping every movement visible, and removed a small credential wallet. Lawson accepted it, examined the identification for only a few seconds, and closed it with a respectful expression before returning it. No dramatic announcement followed. No raised voices interrupted the quiet rhythm of the rain. Instead, Lawson simply looked toward Ryan and said, Officer Cooper, Mr. Carter's identity has been confirmed through secure departmental channels. He is participating in an authorized assignment connected to professional standards. Ryan remained silent for several moments as the meaning of those words slowly settled into place. James had never claimed special authority. He had never attempted to influence the encounter by revealing his position. From the first greeting until that very moment, he had chosen to let professionalism speak for itself. Lawson turned back toward James. "Thank you for handling this exactly as instructed." James nodded. "The process only works when everyone allows it to work." Ryan stepped forward, his expression noticeably different from the confidence he had displayed earlier. "Sir," he said respectfully, "I appreciate your cooperation tonight." James answered with quiet sincerity. Every traffic stop should end with professionalism, regardless of who is standing on either side of the conversation. Lawson allowed a brief silence before adding, "What matters now is not embarrassment. What matters is learning from every decision documented tonight." Rain continued falling softly across the highway as passing headlights reflected from the wet pavement. And although the roadside looked exactly the same as it had 20 minutes earlier, the atmosphere had changed completely. Without anger, without humiliation, and without unnecessary drama, the balance of understanding had quietly shifted, while every recorded moment prepared to become part of a careful review where facts, rather than assumptions, would speak for themselves. The rain finally eased as Captain Michael Lawson thanked James Carter for his professionalism and watched him return calmly to his sedan. The roadside encounter had ended without raised voices, yet everyone present understood that its significance had only begun. Officer Ryan Cooper remained beside his patrol cruiser for several quiet moments, replaying every decision he had made since activating his emergency lights. The confidence that had guided him at the beginning of the stop had given way to careful reflection. Captain Lawson approached him with the same calm demeanor he had displayed throughout the evening. "Go ahead and complete your required documentation," he said. "Everything else will follow established procedure." Ryan nodded respectfully. He understood that no conclusions would be reached beside the highway. Every recorded moment would be reviewed through the same professional standards applied to every employee. James started the engine of his sedan and prepared to merge back onto the interstate. Before leaving, he lowered the window one final time. "Captain," he said, "thank you." Lawson smiled politely. "Safe travels." James then looked toward Ryan. "Officer, every difficult moment offers someone the opportunity to become better. I hope tonight becomes one of those moments." Ryan answered quietly, "I understand." Without another word, James guided the sedan back into traffic and disappeared beneath the glow of distant streetlights. The flashing emergency lights were switched off, leaving only the sound of passing vehicles and the fading rhythm of rain against the pavement. Early the next morning, the recordings from the encounter arrived at professional standards for routine review. Inside a secure conference room, investigators organized body camera footage, dashboard camera recordings, dispatch communications, and written reports into a complete timeline. Every action would be evaluated in chronological order. No assumption would replace evidence. No opinion would outweigh documented facts. James entered the room carrying only a notebook and a cup of coffee. He greeted each investigator with quiet professionalism before taking a seat near the end of the table. He did not lead the discussion because his role required impartial observation rather than personal involvement. Captain Lawson opened the meeting by reminding everyone of the division's purpose. Professional accountability protects the public, but it also protects honorable officers by ensuring every conclusion is based on evidence instead of speculation. The recordings began playing from the first moment emergency lights appeared behind James's vehicle. The room remained silent as investigators watched the interaction unfold exactly as it had happened. James's calm cooperation, Ryan's questions, dispatch communications, and every pause between conversations were preserved without alteration. One investigator occasionally stopped the recording to compare timestamps with radio logs, ensuring every detail matched the official record. No one rushed the process because accuracy mattered more than speed. As the review continued, several supervisors noted moments where additional verification could have resolved uncertainty sooner. Others observed that respectful communication had prevented the encounter from escalating despite growing tension. Captain Lawson carefully summarized each observation without assigning blame before the complete review had concluded. James listened without interruption, occasionally writing brief notes before closing his notebook. He understood that genuine accountability depended upon fairness for everyone involved. When the final recording ended, the room remained quiet for several thoughtful seconds. Captain Lawson finally spoke. Every encounter teaches something. Our responsibility is making sure the lesson improves tomorrow instead of remaining trapped in yesterday. Around the table, investigators nodded in agreement. Outside the conference room, another ordinary workday continued across Atlanta, while inside, careful review rather than emotion quietly prepared the next chapter of a story built upon responsibility, integrity, and the belief that lasting public trust begins with the courage to examine every fact before reaching any conclusion. Several weeks after the review began, the Professional Standards Division completed its examination with the same discipline that had guided every stage of the process. No shortcuts had been taken. Every body camera recording, dashboard camera file, radio transmission, dispatch log, and written report had been compared carefully until the complete timeline matched from beginning to end. Inside a conference room at police headquarters, Captain Michael Lawson met with department leaders, training supervisors, and Officer Ryan Cooper. The atmosphere remained calm and professional because the purpose of the meeting was accountability rather than humiliation. Captain Lawson summarized the findings with measured clarity. Every decision made in uniform carries lasting consequences, he said. Our responsibility is to strengthen public trust by learning from documented facts instead of personal assumptions. Ryan listened without interruption. Watching the recordings for a second time had been more difficult than the first because he now recognized moments where patience could have produced better judgment. He understood that confidence becomes valuable only when balanced by verification, restraint, and respect. Department leadership outlined several professional development requirements designed to reinforce communication, ethical decision-making, and procedural consistency. Ryan accepted each recommendation without argument. He knew genuine credibility could only be rebuilt through daily conduct rather than words spoken inside a conference room. Later that afternoon, James Carter returned to the Professional Standards Office for a routine follow-up meeting. He greeted investigators by name, thanked the administrative staff for their professionalism, and quietly reviewed the final documentation before signing the required acknowledgement forms. One investigator asked whether he believed the process had achieved its purpose. James considered the question carefully before answering. The goal was never to prove that one person failed, he said. The goal was to make sure the next encounter is handled even better than the last one. The room fell silent for a brief moment because everyone understood the importance of those words. Captain Lawson nodded with quiet approval. That perspective is exactly why accountability protects everyone, he replied. During the following days, updated guidance was distributed throughout the department. Patrol officers attended small group discussions focused on respectful communication, careful observation, complete documentation, and unbiased decision-making. Real roadside encounters were examined as learning opportunities rather than personal criticism. Supervisors encouraged officers to ask questions, challenge assumptions with evidence, and remember that every individual deserves the same professional treatment before any conclusion is reached. Ryan participated fully in every session. He spoke honestly about the value of slowing down, listening carefully, and allowing facts to lead every decision. Younger officers appreciated his willingness to discuss difficult experiences without making excuses, and many later admitted that his openness influenced the way they approached their own responsibilities. Across the city, James quietly continued his assignments with the same discipline that had always defined his work. He never spoke publicly about the roadside encounter because recognition had never been his objective. His responsibility remained the same as it had always been. Observe carefully, document accurately, and allow integrity to guide every recommendation. One evening, while driving home beneath a clear Georgia sunset, he passed the same stretch of Interstate 75 where flashing blue lights had once interrupted an ordinary commute. This time the highway flowed peacefully beneath the fading light, and countless drivers continued toward their destinations without realizing that one quiet encounter on that road had helped strengthen the standards expected from everyone entrusted with serving the public. James smiled gently before continuing home, knowing that lasting change is rarely announced with applause. More often, it begins with ordinary people choosing responsibility over pride, patience over assumption, and truth over convenience. Months after the review had concluded, The quiet changes that began with one rainy evening continued spreading throughout the department in ways few people outside the organization would ever notice. New officers entering the academy no longer studied policies only as written procedures. They examined real examples demonstrating how patience, careful observation, and respectful communication could influence every decision made on the roadside. Captain Michael Lawson often reminded each class that integrity is measured most accurately during ordinary moments when nobody expects history to remember them. Officer Ryan Cooper attended many of those sessions, not as an instructor claiming perfection, but as a professional willing to explain how confidence becomes stronger only after it learns humility. He spoke openly about the importance of allowing verified facts to replace first impressions, encouraging every recruit to slow down, ask thoughtful questions, and document situations with precision instead of assumption. The honesty in his voice carried more weight than polished speeches because everyone listening understood that genuine growth always begins with accountability. James Carter quietly continued serving within the Professional Standards Division, moving from assignment to assignment with the same discipline that had defined his entire career. Most officers who crossed paths with him never realized the calm man, carrying an ordinary briefcase, spent his days helping strengthen the standards protecting both the public and honorable law enforcement professionals. He preferred it that way. Recognition had never been the purpose of his work. One afternoon, James accepted an invitation to observe a joint training exercise involving patrol officers, supervisors, and professional standards investigators. The exercise recreated a routine traffic stop using volunteer participants, allowing officers to practice communication, documentation, and procedural decision-making under realistic conditions. Ryan happened to lead one of the demonstration groups. As James watched quietly from the back of the room, he noticed how differently Ryan approached each conversation compared with the night they first met. Every greeting began respectfully. Every request was explained clearly. Every pause allowed time for understanding rather than pressure. After the demonstration ended, several recruits gathered around Ryan asking practical questions about maintaining professionalism during stressful encounters. Ryan answered each one patiently before noticing James standing nearby. Their eyes met briefly, and both men exchanged a quiet nod that required no explanation. Later, during a break, Ryan walked over with a warm but reserved smile. "I wanted to thank you," he said sincerely, "not for making my job difficult that night, but for reminding me what this profession is supposed to represent." James smiled gently before replying, "The profession belongs to everyone willing to improve it. Every conversation is another opportunity." They shook hands, not as opponents from an old misunderstanding, but as two public servants who now shared the same goal of strengthening trust through responsibility. As the training concluded, recruits departed carrying notebooks filled with practical lessons instead of dramatic stories. Outside, late afternoon sunlight stretched across the academy parking lot while patrol vehicles prepared for evening shifts throughout Atlanta. James watched several cruisers leave the grounds before turning toward his own car. He understood that meaningful change rarely arrives through one extraordinary event. More often, it grows quietly through hundreds of ordinary decisions repeated with honesty, fairness, and discipline until those choices become the new standard. Somewhere beyond the academy gates, another driver and another officer would eventually meet beneath unfamiliar circumstances. James hoped they would never know his name, because if the lessons from that rainy highway had truly taken root, they would not need to. Nearly a year after that rainy evening on Interstate 75, the lessons drawn from one carefully documented encounter had become woven into everyday routines throughout the department. Few officers entering the morning briefing room knew the full story behind the procedural updates they now followed automatically. Yet every checklist, every communication guideline, and every reminder to verify facts before reaching conclusions reflected the quiet influence of that single night. Captain Michael Lawson reviewed monthly training reports with quiet satisfaction as supervisors described measurable improvements in communication, documentation, and community interactions. Complaints related to unnecessary misunderstandings had declined, while positive feedback from citizens steadily increased. The changes were never celebrated with headlines because meaningful progress often arrives without public attention. It simply becomes visible through thousands of ordinary encounters handled with greater patience and professionalism. James Carter continued his work with the Professional Standards Division exactly as he always had, preferring careful observation over recognition. His assignments frequently required him to evaluate procedures, review documentation, and assist investigators searching for facts instead of assumptions. Younger investigators occasionally asked him how he remained so composed when dealing with difficult situations. James always offered the same answer. If your purpose is to improve the system, your emotions can never become more important than the evidence. Those words gradually became something many investigators repeated during their own training sessions. Across town, Officer Ryan Cooper had quietly earned renewed trust from colleagues through consistent actions rather than promises. He volunteered to mentor newly assigned patrol officers, encouraging them to slow down during roadside encounters, explain every request clearly, and remember that respectful communication often prevented unnecessary tension before it ever began. One evening, while riding with a rookie officer during field training, Ryan noticed a vehicle safely pulling onto the shoulder after emergency lights were activated. The young officer appeared eager to hurry through the stop. Ryan gently placed a hand on the center console before they stepped outside. "Take your time," he said calmly. "Every person deserves the opportunity to understand what is happening. Professionalism begins before the first question is ever asked." The rookie nodded thoughtfully, and together they approached the vehicle with patience and courtesy. Watching from a short distance, Ryan recognized how differently he now viewed situations that once seemed routine. Confidence no longer meant acting first. Confidence meant allowing facts to arrive before judgment. Several weeks later, James attended a regional conference where leaders from multiple law enforcement agencies shared successful practices for strengthening public confidence. Captain Lawson invited Ryan to participate in one discussion panel alongside supervisors, investigators, and training coordinators. No one mentioned personal mistakes or embarrassing moments. Instead, they focused entirely on practical improvements that had produced better outcomes for officers and citizens alike. As the session concluded, one attendee asked what single principle mattered most when serving the public. James looked briefly toward Ryan before answering with quiet conviction. "Treat every person with the same dignity before you know anything about them. Everything else becomes easier after that." Ryan smiled in agreement, understanding that those simple words carried the weight of experience rather than theory. Outside the conference center, the afternoon sun reflected across the Atlanta skyline while patrol vehicles, government sedans, and ordinary commuters traveled the same roads together. Most drivers never realized how many quiet decisions protected them every day. James watched the traffic for a moment before continuing toward his next assignment, confident that lasting change is rarely created by one dramatic event. It grows steadily through ordinary people choosing integrity every time nobody is watching. The following spring arrived with clear skies over Atlanta, replacing the rain that had quietly connected the lives of two professionals nearly a year earlier. Interstate 75 carried its usual stream of commuters, families, delivery trucks, and patrol vehicles, each driver focused on reaching another ordinary destination. To everyone passing through, it was simply another highway. Yet for James Carter, every mile along that familiar stretch served as a quiet reminder that even the smallest decisions could shape something far greater than one evening or one conversation. He guided his sedan through the morning traffic with the same calm confidence that had always defined him. Nothing about his appearance suggested the responsibility he carried each day, and he preferred it that way. His work had never been about recognition. It had always been about protecting the integrity of a profession built upon public trust. At nearly the same hour, Officer Ryan Cooper completed his equipment inspection before beginning another patrol shift. His routine looked almost identical to the one he had followed countless times before, but his perspective had changed in ways no checklist could measure. Every traffic stop now began with the same quiet reminder. Observe first. Listen carefully. Verify completely. Reach conclusions only after the facts have been given every opportunity to speak. Younger officers riding with him quickly noticed those habits and gradually adopted them as their own. Respectful greetings replaced rushed assumptions. Clear explanations replaced unnecessary tension. Patience became part of the routine instead of an exception, Captain Michael Lawson watched those changes continue throughout the department with quiet satisfaction. During leadership meetings, supervisors no longer discussed a single roadside encounter. Instead, they spoke about stronger communication, improved documentation, and growing confidence between officers and the communities they served. The true success of accountability, Lawson often believed, was measured by the number of future mistakes prevented rather than the number of past mistakes remembered. Later that month, representatives from several law enforcement agencies gathered for a regional conference focused on professional excellence and public trust. James attended as one of many investigators sharing practical ideas for improving organizational standards. Ryan participated alongside patrol supervisors who discussed lessons learned through experience and continued training. Their paths crossed again during a break between presentations. There were no flashing lights, no rain, and no uncertainty waiting beside a highway shoulder. James extended his hand with a warm smile. Ryan accepted it with genuine appreciation. "Good to see you again," Ryan said. James nodded. "It is good to see progress." Neither man needed to revisit the details of the night that first connected their stories, because both understood that the value of that experience lived in everything that followed afterward. Before returning to their respective sessions, Ryan quietly thanked James one final time. "You reminded me that authority is never proven by control," he said. "It is proven by responsibility." James smiled before offering one final thought. "Responsibility is what allows trust to survive." As the conference concluded, the afternoon sun settled across the Atlanta skyline while officers, investigators, and ordinary citizens continued their separate journeys. Life moved forward without dramatic headlines or public celebration, just thousands of ordinary encounters shaped by better choices than the day before. Somewhere, another patrol car would eventually activate its emergency lights. Somewhere else, another driver would safely pull onto the shoulder. Neither would know this story, yet both could still benefit from the lesson it left behind. Because true integrity does not reveal itself when people believe they are being watched. It reveals itself in every quiet decision made when character is the only witness. And that is where lasting justice always begins.